Yeah. Well, we're transitioning a little bit to Elisha, although it's still. Make sure. Look there. There you go. And but this is where we first introduced to Elisha. So Elisha is going to be the main focal point as far as the prophets go uh, after Elijah. Now Elijah's still around. In fact, this deals with when Elijah anoints Elisha. But so Elisha and Obadiah, because we're trying to do this in a chronological order. And Obadiah, the prophet, who wrote the book of Obadiah. Now, what all do you know about the book of Obadiah?
Short.
Short. Okay. Hey, you know a lot then, because it's one chapter, so it is short. Uh, it 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 to be honest, it seems a little unusual for it to be there, but I think there is a purpose for it, and we'll get to that at the end of this because he was. I I lean towards that when it was written early days. It makes more sense that it was written during this early time period. In fact, it may have been the earliest of the uh, prophetic books written, either the minor or major prophets. And so we'll look at that. Now, today we're going to be talking about Elisha. Elisha, you first introduced to him in 1 Kings 19. Uh, Remember, Elisha is going to be, well, as we start Second Kings, that's the basically the final days of Elijah on this earth. He doesn't die, but it's his final days on this earth. And Elisha is the one that is with him until he's taken up into heaven. Um, and so Elisha is going to be prominent for a while. Elisha, even after he dies, is going to be prominent. Somebody dug up his bones, and needless to say, it didn't go well for him. So anyway, we see that Obadiah uh, was around. Now we've read about an Obadiah. Is that the same? We'll wait for that when we get there. So we'll deal with that. So the great prophet Elijah, we talked a lot about him, but remember he had his little pity party. He went all the way down to Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, whichever one you want to call it. And I'm alone, God. I've been zealous for you, done all this, and God had this demonstration for him. Where he did all these different things, and finally spoke real softly and pointed out that Elisha would be the prophet in his name after him, and that all these people, and I think it was 10,000 people had not yet bowed down to worship Baal. So this is, and I've done this. In fact, I believe I did this at the round robin this year. Have you boiled your oxen lately? So if you were there, I did a full lesson. Now we're not going to do that on this, but says so he departed from there. That's Elijah, and found Elisha the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him, and he was with the 12. Now, have you ever plowed with a beast of burden or seen a beast of burden plowing? I think you've
I've
talked,
been
you had mules,
mule.
didn't you? Mules, yes.
Seen
Mules.
mule.
A mule strong.
I'll be plowing out there in a mule.
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Grip and race nearly on. The dirt come up for hit them mule.
Uh, my dad, we was renting some property, and the landowner had a huge farm, and he lived just next door. You could walk to it, but in between there was this just plain land. And my dad asked him, said, well, I'd like to make a garden out there. It was a good sized garden. And he said, okay. He said, well, can I borrow your, because he was old school. He liked using his mule to do little work like that. He had tractors, but for garden work, he'd use his mule. And so my dad asked him, said, Mr. Butler, his name was Homer Butler. I'll remember that. But anyway, he said, can I borrow your mule? He said, sure, go right ahead. Said, and, whatever you need. And so he went with him because he helped him hook it up and everything. And he told him the words he had to use, how to make it go left to right and stuff. And so my dad's trying to get him to go. He's saying it, yelling at him and talking to him, and things just sitting there.
Just stood there.
Just stood there. And he looked at Homer Butler. He said, "What am I doing wrong?" And so Homer Butler just simply said the word, and my dad, he looked like Superman. That was pulling so fast. He was parallel to the ground, just trying to hold on. The thing was going so fast. It was one mule. So did you ever fly with more than one mule?
That too.
At two. Oh wow, y'all were big time. But as strong as a mule is,
They run a cultivator
yeah, an ox is stronger.
and metal buster.
They outweigh that mule by quite a bit. And ox is a bull that's been rendered, generally castrated and rendered into a beast of burden. But you can just imagine how strong they would be. So 12 yoke. Can you imagine how powerful that would be?
We lived out in the swamp
Uh-huh.
down there. Even my mother and dad, they never
Yeah.
learned how to operate, drive
Uh-huh.
the automobile
Yeah.
and always wagon and mule.
My point is, what can we glean from the fact that this guy had 12 yoke of oxen? And they apparently had more. This was the one he was working with, and apparently he had others that had others, but he had 12 yoke of oxen to plow with. What would you glean from that?
He's in business or he's wealthy.
Well, yeah, because he had some money. Because I guarantee it, most people probably were lucky to have one oxen they could use to do the beast of burden work. Because first of all, that means he had 12 oxen that he could uh,
Rent
use
out.
for just plowing and stuff, as opposed to most people would have needed that for
That sound like
food
a
or
plantation.
it does, don't it? He had a big outfit. So anyway, he was apparently a wealthy farmer, which most people were farmers back in that day. But he was a wealthy one, and he probably had a lot of people working under him. Uh, I mean, it'd be kind of like mowing one of these small yards with you know, I see it every now and then. People mow a little bitty yard with one of these big, huge zero turn mowers. It's like a little overkill. But so he had this. So he had a comfortable life. And so anyway, it says Elijah passed by him and cast his cloak on him. Now, why is that significant? What would that, do you think, signify? That his cloak, his outer garment, uh, uh, why would it be significant that he took it off and cast it at the feet of Elisha?
Well, I guess Ox would recognize him as the other guy, right?
Elijah took his cloak off and put it at the feet of Elisha.
I thought it was
No. So what? First of all,
Kind of like a king.
yes.
His crown.
So uh, Elijah as a prophet, he wore a special cloak. People recognized it. People would know, well, that's Elijah. Elijah. It was special for prophets, and in this case, people knew throughout the whole country who Elijah was. And so he takes it off, his cloak that identified him as a prophet, and he puts it down at the feet of Elisha. So what does that signify?
Offered him a position.
Okay. So basically, that's what he's saying. I want you to follow after me. I'm going to designate you a prophet, which is exactly what God had told him. And so Elisha would have known this as well. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, "Let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will go follow you." And he said to him, "Go back again for what I've done to you." And he returned, following him, took the yoke of oxen, sacrificed them, boiled their flesh with the yokes of oxen, and gave it to all the people, and they ate. Then he arose and went after Elijah and assisted him. Now, the question that comes up a lot of times uh, is was Elisha hesitant to do the mission that God wanted for him? Was this a delay tactic? Was it similar to, and I'll just read it, Luke 9, 56 through 62, it says, And they were going along the road, and someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. To another he said, Follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, Leave the dead to bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Yet another said, I will follow you, but let me first say farewell to those at my home. Jesus said to him, No, one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. So people say, well, does this not apply to Elisha? One. Two, is the Lord being heartless in saying you can't even go bury your father? Uh, what do we know about this passage that goes a little bit beyond just what the text you might read? What is the emphasis? What is the main point Jesus is making to the people saying they'll follow him? Who who is to be the number one priority in your life?
Right.
Christ. So that should be your focus. Now, the other thing is this go and bury my father, most likely, because this was a normal circumstance, this guy may have been the eldest child, and the eldest child had certain responsibilities. One was they were responsible for taking care of the needs of their parents because in that day and age, you didn't have Social Security. The way they took care of retirement was at some point you would give your inheritance to your children before you died. And with that double portion that the eldest received, they would take care of their parents. So apparently, this was already in this stage. And so he's saying, when my dad dies, I've got to bury him. It's my responsibility. And Jesus says, no, your first responsible needs to be following me. Now, was Elisha reluctant in what he did? Turn back to that scripture. Was this not the same? And if not, how do we know it wasn't the same? I'm going to throw out a question. So if Elijah said, no, we don't have time for that, you've got to come with me now. What do you think Elisha would have done? He would have went. Two, how do we know that he wasn't hedging his bet and wanting to go back to his life before he was given this cloak? What significant thing does he do?
Sacrifices.
Yeah.
Animals.
took the yoke of oxen and he took the equipment that the yoke, all that stuff together, used that as the firewood, and burned it, and they had a big party, going away party, I guess you'd call it. Uh, you know, I believe I would have probably roasted it or, put it in a barbecue or whatever, and told Steve, and he's got an idea too, kind of like what they do the pigs, where they roast them all whole. It'd be fun to take a whole cow and do the same thing. But anyway, uh, big expensive little party. But he showed that he was committed to leaving because he made it to where it'd be difficult to come back. I think that's a good thing to do. If the drunkard wants to stop drinking, he repents, says, I'm going to stop drinking. And yet all his cabinets are full of liquor. He may have stopped, but what's that saying? Well, if I really need a
He
drink.
had something to look at, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah. You should just get rid of it, dump it out, and so we understand this, that he was never coming back. He had left for good, and he knew that it's a different life that he would lead. So anyway, there isn't a similarity in the way it is described. So that is Elisha. Now we'll read more about Elisha, but same time period we got Obadiah. So we need to talk about Obadiah's son. Now, in 1 Kings 18, 3-6, we've read about an Obadiah. It says, and Ahab, remember, called Obadiah. This is before they had the big battle between the prophets of Baal and Elijah and creating the fire and everything. And Ahab called Obadiah, who was over the household. Now, Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. And when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by the 50s in a cave and fed them with bread and water. And Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go through the land, all the springs of the water in the valleys. Perhaps we may find grass to save the horses and mules alive and not lose some of the animals." Remember, it hadn't rained in 3.5 years. So they divided the land between them to pass through. And Ahab went in one direction by himself, and Obadiah went another direction by himself. And who did Obadiah encounter? Elijah. So we read about that. So who is this Obadiah? Is he the same Obadiah that wrote the book of Obadiah? Well, and so what I've got written here is we cannot say for certain. It's the same Obadiah who wrote the prophet that wrote the book. Obadiah means servant or worshiper of Yahweh, Jehovah. There are over 10 people in the Old Testament named Obadiah, though. However, this Obadiah does fit the timeline that many people believe Obadiah was written. If this is the same one from 1 Kings 18, then the date of the writing would be among the earliest of the prophets of Israel, around 841 to 848 BC, during the time of the revolt of Edom from Judah. And when we read Obadiah, that fits. It fits perfectly with the theme of the book of Obadiah and likely when it was written. So it's very possible that this was the Obadiah. We can't say conclusively because apparently it was a common name. So it could have been another Obadiah. It doesn't technically call him a prophet, but he was associated with the prophet. So either way, Obadiah, whichever Obadiah this was, wrote it, I believe, during this time frame. So what do we know about this? Well, in Second Chronicles, by the way, Obadiah. Let's see. Did it say prophet? Let me go back real quick. Okay. Yeah, I thought so. So I like this chart because it not only lists the prophets and the time, but it lists who they prophesied to. Because remember, we got divided kingdoms. So who did Obadiah prophesy to? Did he prophesy to the northern kingdom of Israel or to the southern kingdom of Judah? Divided kingdom. Israel this side, Judah that side. Where's Obadiah?
North side.
Huh?
North side.
North side's over here in Israel. Obadiah's over here. Sure. Yeah, he's one circle. Let's see. Obadiah. Here's Elisha. Elisha was in the northern kingdom of Israel. Okay. Judah. Which one is Obadiah? Judah. So the southern kingdom. So he was a southern kingdom prophet. Now you'll see a lot of the prophets, in fact, more of them are probably in the northern kingdom, which is interesting because there were more faithful people here. Remember that's where the temple was, and they did have a few good kings. And over here you had none of the kings were good, but you see Elisha, Elijah. Then you have Amos, Hosea, Jonah. Interesting one there. But you have Joel a little bit later on in this one. But then you got a few others as we go past the time of the kings. But anyway, so Obadiah was a southern kingdom. It will make sense when we look at some things later too. Let me fast forward now to back to Obadiah. Okay, so in the days of Edom, in his days, Edom revolted from the rule of Judah and set up a king of their own. Then Jehoram passed over with his commanders and all his chariots, and he rose by night and struck the Edomites who had surrounded him and his chariot commanders. So Edom revolted from the rule of Judah to this day. At that time, Libnah also revolted from his rule because he had forsaken the Lord, the God of his fathers. Now, we'll get into this a little later, but it's during this revolt. Now, what else? Go backwards. We know a little bit about Edom. In Numbers 20:14-21, Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Moses is around. They're wandering through the wilderness at this time. Thus says your brother Israel. Okay. Moses says, thus says your brother Israel. Who was Edom? What was Edom? Simply means red, by the way. What was Edom? And why would Moses says, thus says your brother Israel? Who was Israel? I don't think you'll find it on that chart. So, who was Edom? The country. Who was Israel? The country. Well, let's do the one should be easier. So, Israel. Where does Israel come from? We've been studying that even on Wednesday, on Sunday mornings a little bit. What does Israel mean? Israel means what? One who strives with God. Where did the name first originate? Who was renamed Israel? He wrestled the angel Jehovah. Wouldn't let go. So God blessed him and gave him a different name because he strove with God. Who was that? He's the father of the 12 tribes.
Jacob.
Jacob, yes, Jacob. Jacob. In the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, it's the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Jacob wrestled that angel, wouldn't let go until the angel gave him a blessing. And the angel blessed him and said, your name is now Israel. You have striven with God. And so he wouldn't let go of the angel until he got a blessing. God renames him Israel. So all of Jacob's descendants become the nation of Israel. Okay, so we got that one. So, and what I'm trying to do is sometimes you need to use a little reasoning when you look at things. And you probably know more than you think you do. So Moses sent out messengers. He says to the king of Edom, the nation of Edom, thus says your brother Israel. So who was Edom? And where did they derive from? That Moses would call them a brother. Well, where did Israel come from? Jacob. Did Jacob have a brother? What was Jacob's brother name? Esau. Okay, now you have the answer. See? So Jacob and Esau, by the way, they were twins, were they not? Esau was just a hair older, but Jacob grabbed a hold of his foot as he was being delivered. And so Jacob and Esau, the descendants of Esau, were called Edom. They became Edomites. In the New Testament, the name is got a slight derivation. It's Idumea. In fact, King Herod the Great, and all his descendants, they were descendants of Esau. But anyway, thus says your brother Israel, you know all the hardship that we have met. This is as they've left Egypt, Our fathers went down to Egypt, and we lived in Egypt a long time, and the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and our fathers. And when we cried to the Lord, he heard our voice and sent an angel and brought us out of Egypt. And here we are in Kadesh. By the way, just side note here, according to Paul, that rock that led them was Jesus. But anyway, and here we are in Kadesh, a city on the edge of your territory. Please let us pass through your land. We will not pass through field or vineyard or drink water from a well. We will go along the king's highway. We will not turn aside to the right hand or to the left until we have passed through territory. So Moses says, let us cut through here. It's quicker, where we're ultimately going. And we won't take any food. We won't stop. We won't do anything except go down the highway. But Edom said to him, You shall not pass through, lest I come out with the sword against you. And the people of Israel said to him, We will go up by the highway, and if we drink your water, and I am a livestock, then I will pay for it. Let me only pass through on foot, nothing more. And he said, You shall not pass through. And Edom came out against them with a large army, with a strong force. Thus Edom refused to give Israel passage through his territory, so Israel turned away from him. Now, there'd be repercussions because of this. Psalms 137:7 says, Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem, how they said, lay it bare down to its foundations. Um, so here's another little map. So Obadiah was from prophesied to which part? Israel or Judah? Which one? Judah. And where is Edom? Just a little south of Judah. So it's down in the southern area. Um, I think that might be part of Jordan. I meant to double check that. But anyway. So Edom. The Edomites, Edomians, they basically are no more, by the way. They met their ultimate demise when Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70. Obadiah 1 through 9, division of Obadiah. Thus says the Lord God concerning Edom. So the book of Obadiah is all about Edom. It says, We have heard a report from the Lord, and a messenger has been sent among the nations. Rise up, let us rise against her for battle. Okay, that's what the people wanted to do. Behold, I will make you small among the nations. You shall be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you. You who live in the cliffs of the rock, in your lofty dwelling, who say in your heart, Who will bring me down to the ground? Though you soar aloft like the eagle, though your nest is set again among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. If thieves come to you, if plunderers come by night, how you have been destroyed, would they not steal only enough for themselves? If great gatherers came to you, would they not leave gleanings? How Esau has been pillaged. Edom, Esau, same thing. His treasure sought out. All your allies have driven to your border. Those at peace with you have deceived you. They have prevailed against you. Those who eat your bread have set a trap beneath you. You have no understanding. Will I not on that day, declares the Lord, destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding out of Mount Esau, and your mighty men shall be dismayed. O Teman, that's one of the cities of Edom, so that every man from Mount Esau will be cut off by slaughter. Now, most people, there's a couple of options here. There is no mount called Mount Esau, but probably the most prominent mountain range in Edom that is known by the name of Petra, and that's likely where this was. You may have no clue where that's at, but you have probably seen it. It is a very unique sight. If y'all ever watched Indiana Jones, the one with Sean Connery, the fourth one, if you watch that one where they're looking for the Holy Grail, you saw Petra right there. That place where they went in, where it's supposed to be, it's a very prominent site. They carved it out of the stone. It looks really cool. But anyway, that is in the modern country of Jordan. So you can actually go visit. It's a pretty prominent tourist attraction to see, and it was I think a church at one point in time. And anyway, but that's where this is likely at. So that was uh, Mount Esau. But that in verse 10 says, Because of the violence done to your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever. Now, when it's using Esau and Jacob, it's not going back to their lives. It's going back to what Edom has done to Israel and to Judah. Um, shall be cut off forever. On that day you stood aloft, and on that day strangers carried off his wealth, and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem. You were like one of them. But do not gloat over the day of your brother and the day of his misfortune. Now, there's going to be misfortune coming to Judah. Um, to rejoice of the people of Judah in their day of ruin. Do not boast in the day of distress. Do not enter the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Do not gloat over his disaster in the day of his calamity. Do not loot his wealth in the day of his calamity. Do not stand at the crossroads to cut off his fugitives. Do not hand over his survivors in the day of distress. For the day of the Lord is near upon all the nations. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your deeds shall return on your own head. For as you have drunk on my holy mountain, so all the nations shall drink continually. They shall drink and swallow, and shall be as though they had never been. But in Mount Zion there shall be those who escape, and it shall be holy. And the house of Jacob shall possess their own possessions. The house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau stubble. They shall burn them and consume them. There shall be no survivor for the house of Esau, for the Lord hath spoken. Now there is imagery, and it goes on. I don't include all the verses, but it goes on, and really there's imagery of a future kingdom where everything's going to be made right, and it is undoubtedly referring to the church, and that. Those of the Negeb shall possess Mount Esau down south, and those of Shephelah shall possess the land of the Philistines. They shall possess the land of Ephraim, the land of Samaria, and Benjamin shall possess Gilead. The exiles of this host of the people of Israel shall possess the land of Canaanites as far as Zarephath. The exiles of Jerusalem who are in Zarephath shall possess the cities of the Negeb. Saviors shall go up to the mountain of Zion to rule Mount Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. Wanted to get a little bit, this comes from Kaufman Commentary, just gives a little bit of history of Edom, which becomes Idumea. The fulfillment began in the Chaldean period, for Nebuchadnezzar unquestionably destroyed Edom upon the same occasion as that of capturing Jerusalem. So at the same time he conquered Jerusalem, he also went further south and did the same to Edom. And 5 years later, destroying the Moabites and Ammonites, as unquestionably inferred from Jeremiah 49:7, Ezekiel 30, and on and on. The Edomites were mentioned among the nations round about Judah, whom God would deliver into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. This is prophesied in Jeremiah 25:9. It is certain that this was accomplished despite the fact of Josephus having failed to mention it. By the times of Alexander the Great, of course, this is 200 years or so, actually almost 300 years before the time of Christ. By the time of Alexander the Great, Edom was of no great importance, and accounts of Alexander's exploits make no mention of their subjection by the fierce Macedonian. But it is certain that they shared the fate of the rest of the known world during the 4th century in falling under the dominion of Alexander's worldwide empire. Their continued destruction continued in the 2nd century BC when John Hyrcanus, this is the Maccabean dynasty, subdued Edom entirely from 129 BC, even compelling them to submit to circumcision and submit to Mosaic law. Some independence remained for Edom until the 1st century, but when they became conspicuous for cruelties penetrated during the closing years of the Jewish state, the Romans utterly destroyed them in AD 70, and in the mop-up campaign afterward utterly devastated their fortress homeland. The few who remained were lost among the Arabs later, so the Edomites were cut off forever. So like I said, there is no people of Idumea or Edom anymore. Now, I will point out, too, that during this time of the Maccabees, there was someone that would rise up, and I forget the name of Herod the Great's father, but he would rise up and have some independence and actually be a leader of Idumea. And then Herod the Great was a very shrewd politician. He befriended first Mark Antony and Cleopatra and helped them in a battle. And then he was able to convince Octavius, who became Caesar Augustus, that, I'm beneficial to the Roman Empire after Mark Antony and Cleopatra were killed. And anyway, and of course, you know a lot of the rest. He was a master builder. But, so anyway, so, when you read prophecy in the Old Testament, the thing you got to caution yourself is when God says you'll be utterly destroyed. When God said to Adam and Eve, you will surely die, what did that mean? Did they die right away? They ate fruit? Oh,
In the aging process.
yeah. Did they die?
Not then, but they died.
They died. They did die, 900 years later or whatever. So Edom was destroyed and completely cut off forever. It didn't happen, within the time frame of the prophet, but it did eventually happen. So sometimes prophecy is like that. So prophecy doesn't always, it doesn't always happen right away because God doesn't look at time the same way that we would. So what's your thoughts of Obadiah? Like I say, it's not a one chapter, but with a lot of the books of prophecy, you got to put it in context. He's definitely talking about Edom, what they'd done to Moses earlier, what they had done to rebelling against Judah at this current time, and the consequences for doing that. So, uh, you know, uh, each of especially the minor prophets, they'll have a a very distinct item that they're dealing with. Sometimes the major prophets it's a little more broad based because there are more chapters. Anyway, well, I'll go ahead and cut this off, but we can continue talking. But next week we'll get past this. We'll learn about what ultimately happens to Ahab